Welcome to Impact Portsmouth. I don't know about you guys, but I am ridiculously excited. This is the second time we've done this event. We did the first event in May, and it was to a sold-out audience, just like you guys. Pretty sure you guys are a little bit better looking, though, but generally speaking, just don't tell them. Who was here last time? Wow, relatively new crew. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's fantastic. Awesome. So I was wondering, if you're like me, you love spending time with people that do cool things, right? Which is why so many of you are near and dear to my heart, because I firmly believe there are a lot of people, if not all of you, are doing some really, really amazing things that are touching our community in ways that just cannot be quantified. So for that, I thank you. But if you're wondering also, like, what's possible for you? This is a question that I ask myself all the time. What's possible for you? How can you create more positive impact on your community? Because the job is never done. If you're a contributor, you know you never get there, right? You never reach the top of the mountain. You're always escalating yourself. You're always trying to do more good. And that's where it's really, really important about impact, is impact can be positive and impact can be negative, right? So many of us are working towards creating positive impact. And again, for that, I thank you. So one of my most favorite things to do to continue to learn and improve myself is listen to podcasts. And I'm a huge fan of Michael Gervais. Anybody know Finding Mastery? A couple of uh-huhs. I love this. So he just did an interview with Arianna Huffington. And Arianna talked about 4 core principles that leaders and contributors have. And she believes that these 4 core principles are things that we are all destined to have internally. It's like a birthright. And those 4 things are wisdom, strength, peace, and love. Wisdom, strength, peace, and love. Sounds so simple, right? But we know that it's really hard sometimes to tap into those things. So one of the things that truly excites me about an event like this is that tonight all 4 speakers truly tap into those 4 things. You're going to see those and hear those 4 elements coming out of their words, emanating from their emotion, coming out of their body, being expressed in ways that are truly amazing and genuine. And the interesting thing about this is that, unfortunately, Arianna talks about how easy it is to run the other way. And we see people doing this all the time. And with all of this technology and all of this data available to us, we tend to turn off our wisdom, turn off our love, and we wait to see what Instagram tells us we should do, right? It's like MyFitnessPal. I don't really like MyFitnessPal. So many people come in to Lainey Lou and say, is your stuff on MyFitnessPal? And I'm sorry if any of you are on it. And I say, no.
Yeah, I'm over here.
And I say, no, I want you to embrace that donut for everything that it is going to give you. Screw FitnessPal. So no. So the idea is, forget about running away, right? I want you guys to run to. I want you to run towards. And most importantly, I want you to run towards yourself. And so I've brought 4 people together today that are going to tell you stories of how they've ran towards themselves. So I'm Jennifer DeRogers, if you guys didn't know that already. I'm the founder of Wild Adventurous Life and Lainey and Lou Cafe. And my mission in life, like my sole purpose in life, is to inspire you guys to be your greatest self. And so many of you in this room have helped me unravel that vision and helped me get to this place where I can confidently stand up here and say, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that one. And it's a big responsibility, but I love every single moment of it. And it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to do it. So tonight, Impact Portsmouth, my absolute favorite event that I put together all year long. These are the stories of how one's personal mission can change the world. And these stories are told from the heart of the person that's living that story, and it's their own personal truth. And on another podcast I was listening to recently, also probably Michael Gervais, this person was talking about big T truth and little t truth. And so for these guys, this is little t truth, right? It's not some big universal truth. It's their life, how they understand it. And God, it takes a lot of nerve for them to get up here and tell you how they understand their life and to really capture how their personal mission is making a difference. And the key is, if we've done our job with preparing these speakers, they're going to give you a little glimpse of how that mission has changed them personally as well. Okay, so this is not easy, so I asked for you guys to send them as much love as you can. And as it's going, I'll take a little page out of Tony Robbins, which is, don't steal their pain either. Okay, so I want you to experience it, but I don't want you to own it. Does that make sense? All right, who's in? Okay, so contribution is at the heart of everything that we do, and I want to tell you today that all proceeds are donated to 4 amazing nonprofit organizations that were chosen by our speakers. And also, the more you drink, responsibly, the more we get to donate. So I ask you to be bold but respectful. If you're thirsty, grab a server, go up to see Dagan, grab a beer. This is meant to be real and raw. We're not meant to just stand in one place for the next 2 hours, okay? We will do 2 speakers and then have an intermission, and then we'll do another 2 speakers. Okay, so first and foremost, Blue Ocean Society. That was chosen by Bob Fernald. Blue Ocean Society for Marine Conservation is based right here in Portsmouth and was established in 2001. Their mission is to protect marine life in the Gulf of Maine through research, education, and inspiring action. Each year, they work with volunteers to conduct more than 200 beach cleanups and remove thousands of pounds of litter along the coast. They also study local whales and even have a life-size inflatable whale that they bring to schools throughout New England. If I had read this closer, we would have had them bring it here tonight. Do we have a representative from Blue Ocean here?
Yeah.
Woohoo! All right. Thank you. The next organization that we are benefiting tonight is Never Say Never Foundation, which is suggested to us by Tina Hurley. I think these guys are located in Fort Lauderdale. I think they're not here tonight, but we can still appreciate them. The Never Say Never Foundation was started in 2009 by Nick Stelwell and Regis Woods, 2 double amputees that wanted to make a difference in kids' lives. They provide running, prosthetics, and other support for kids and young adults that cannot afford them, while building a support system for them and their families throughout camps and events all over the country, promoting them to chase after their dreams and never say never. By 2018, they will have given away over 100 running blades and hosted camps for thousands of disabled youth. Let's hear it for Never Say Never. Mike Teixeira, he chose Art Speak. Art Speak, as the city's cultural commission, serves as a bridge between the city and the cultural community. Its tasks are outlined in the city's cultural plan and focus on enhancing our cultural community through marketing, advocacy, and administrative support. Do we have a representative from Art Speak here yet? Not yet. He is on his way. Let's hear it for Art Speak. And finally, Amber chose Arts in Reach. Arts in Reach is a nonprofit that provides mentoring through the arts to teenage girls in the Seacoast area. Arts in Reach empowers teenage girls through innovative teaching, mentoring, utilizing accessible arts programming as the platform for success. They develop girls' creativity, freedom, and power of voice in a positive setting where teenage girls thrive. And do we have a representative from Arts and Reach? We do. Yeah, thank you so much. And finally, just a few shout outs. Rhea on assignment, thank you so much. She'll be photography. Miles Woodward, Seacrest Lab, Katie O'Connor in the back, a Wild Adventurous Life brand ambassador. She checked me in. Chris Malloy Events, he gave us all of this amazing equipment to make this possible, free of charge. Liars Bench, thank you so much for everything you're doing with the community. Thank you for making this amazing here. And feel free to take pictures, post, share the word throughout the evening, take Insta stories. Make sure you tag Wild Adventurous Life and hashtag Impact Portsmouth. Okay. Are you with me?
Yes.
All right. This is going to be exciting. All right, let's hear it. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's do this. Our first storyteller is Bob Fernald. Bob has a pretty rare condition. It's called adult onset swimmer. He uncovered this superpower ability to use his mind and body to conquer 20-plus mile swims in treacherous conditions to become New Hampshire's first to earn the Triple Crown in open water swimming. He's also the subject of a new documentary which debuted at the New Hampshire Film Festival called An Allegedly Good Swimmer. Please welcome to Impact Portsmouth, Bob Fernald.
So, story about Bob. Well, how do I do this in 30 minutes? That's tough to do. But when Jen asked me to talk, she gave the topic of inspiration. And so I thought I would try to break my story into 3 parts. Who were the influences in my life that created inspiration for me? What were the trigger points in my life that actually brought me to it? And then what I'm doing today to try to take what I know and inspire others. So it all started with my parents. They taught me the great value life lesson of giving back. And I can remember as a little kid collecting money and walking the March of Dimes 20-mile walk through Portsmouth and Rye. Remember those? You had the little boxes, right? That's when it began for me. And along the road in life, I was lucky to have a bunch of influential coaches in sports, and I wasn't a big sports person, and that'll come up later in the story. But they taught me about hard work and how hard work paid off. And so just as a kid, I played a little bit of Little League. I never was really good at it, but we had a good team, we had a good coach, and the team did well. And I played a little bit of soccer in high school, but when I was young, I learned the value of making money. I started to work, and I started to make cash, and I kind of got away from sports because I could make money as a kid, you know. So that was really a shift in my priorities right early on in my youth. So as I'll talk about the swimming later, there was no swimming in my youth at all. I grew up in Portsmouth, and that early work ethic started at the age of 8 and 9. I was able to work for my neighborhood friend's father owned a fishing business, and he had gillnet boats that he'd go out on Jeffrey's Ledge about 20, 30 miles out and just haul in thousands and thousands of pounds of codfish and haddock. But they had a little 16-foot skiff and about 102, to be exact, lobster traps, and we'd haul 51 on one day and 51 on the other day. But in order for my parents to let me work on the boat, I had to take swim lessons. So I took a few token swim lessons at Pierce Island for the sole purpose of being able to be on the boat. I also had to wear one of those old-fashioned funky life preservers, the kind that choke you around the neck with the 3 metal clips, right? And I didn't wear that, I'll tell you that. I did take the lessons, but it was a means to work. And then, you know, fast forwarding into my professional career, I wound up on the West Coast. And I had one very influential manager named Jim Barnhart, and I was asking him, what do I want to do with my life? How can I shape my career in the world of service marketing and service business development? And do y'all remember the tearaway sheet calendars that had jokes on them or words of inspiration? They were like this thick. The Far Side had one, right?
Yeah.
So I was sitting there talking to him, and he ripped off the quote of the day, and it was by Wolfgang Amadeus, and I think I still have it somewhere. And it said, "Find a passion and follow it. That's all the career advice you'll ever need." And I've since read so many articles that said that's such hogwash, because you can have that passion, but you might not be able to pay your mortgage. Right? But the purpose of that still stuck with me. So the one big event that really centered my give back and my inspiration was a friend of mine's mom came down with leukemia. And so I joined a national program called the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's Team and Training Program. They train you to run a marathon, you raise money for cancer research, and they take you to a location to run a marathon. And so I successfully raised money and I successfully finished the marathon. But the organization asked me to stay on. They said, "Hey, can you be a part of this marathon training program?" And I said, "I just came from the couch and literally ran my first marathon. I had, no runs prior to that. This is probably in my young 30s or so at the time." And after a couple of more seasons, they said, "We would like you to join the coaching staff." And I said, "I know nothing about the technical aspects of running." And they said, "But you're good with people. And what you bring to the team, the coaching staff, is something like, we've all maybe experienced this in our life where you've gone to the doctor's office and they know exactly what's wrong with you before you open your mouth. They know all the technical parts of medicine, but they don't have any good bedside manners, right? So I was bringing the bedside manners to the team because the coaches said, "Hey, we can't teach that. We can teach you about the IT band syndrome and what plantar fasciitis is and what hill repeats are and that sort of thing." So I was very flattered and honored, and so I joined, the coaching staff. And over about 8 seasons, or probably like 6 years or so, I think I helped train about 1,000 runners to finish a marathon, probably raising $5 million.
Wow.
So I found. That's an estimate, please don't research that. So what I learned from all of that was I could help motivate somebody to accomplish something that would have an impact to a global audience, unfortunately, for folks with cancer. And throughout that time, and since then, I've heard of Gleevec and all of these drugs that have come out, and I actually got to see patients' lives extended that were part of the program, which was, really heartfelt. So my coaching friends decided that if I could finish a marathon, that I could compete in a triathlon. And I said, "Well, wait a second. I had a bike as a kid, delivered the paper, right? I did run a marathon with y'all, but this swimming thing, I took those couple of lessons I told you about." And they said, "That's okay, it's no problem, it'll come back to you." And I was living in Northern California around the Palo Alto area. So I said, "So what's the name of the program that you swim with?" And they said, "It's called Master Swimming." I'm like, no, really. It's got to be a beginner thing. There's got to be a beginner. And they're like, "Don't worry, there's a coach there, there's every level of athlete, you're not going to be the only beginner there." And I said, and they kind of bullied me into it, in reality. And so I said to them, "All right, where do you guys meet?" And they said, "Stanford University." I'm like, no, that's just not going to work. A master's in Stanford that has nothing to do with education. But I tried. And I remember this to the day. I showed up, I walked into the pavilion. The first 3 people I see are Dover resident and 5-time Olympic swimming champion, Jenny Thompson. I saw Dara Torres because I could read the name on the side of her Olympic swim cap. And then I saw it, eventually went on to take a training class from 6-time Ironman champion Dave Scott.
Wow.
And so I thought I was moonwalking out of there. Because I was the person that didn't belong. I was wearing running shorts, and my goggles on upside down. The coach came right up to me and said, "Hi." And I said, I don't think I belong here. But anyways, I jumped into the pool to try, and I swam the length of their beautiful, pristine, Division I 50-meter pool, and I puked. And it wasn't pretty. And I turned around, and the whole pool was erupted with swimmers, and I'm over there trying to get everything into the gutter. My friends didn't tell me it's not a good idea to eat a full breakfast before you go for one of these master's workouts. So I lasted about 20 minutes because I was too proud to give up on one length. And I got out and the coach said, "How'd you do?" And I said, maybe I'm a runner. That's it. And she said, "Well, why don't you stay and hang out for coffee?" And so the social aspect of master swimming took over. And so I did go on to finish a few triathlons, but I didn't like to swim at all. I'm hanging out with people at Stanford. I got a Stanford shirt. I'm a little snot-nosed kid from Portsmouth, getting my master's at Stanford. Right? So I gave it up after a while because I lost interest in work got in the way, and ultimately I moved home, back to Portsmouth. And I was out of the water for about 4 years or so. And one cold New England, dark winter, I decided to go to the pool again because I was tired of the treadmill, tired of spinning on a bike in my basement, and all of a sudden I could swim. I could feel everything, and as I was doing it, I was like, wow, that feels so good. Keep doing it, keep doing it. And I just kept saying, you got to keep it up, keep it up. Then the coach took over me and said, you better drink something because this is a sport. You just can't swim and not refuel. So I stopped, and this was at Portsmouth Indoor Pool. And the lifeguards had changed. It was dark out, and I had been swimming for an hour and 45 minutes. And I was like, what? So I really thought it was a fluke. So I thought for sure I was going to be injured, my shoulders would be shredded. And so the next day I felt tired, muscularly, but not, I just felt beaten up like after, I felt better than after I ran a marathon, because that was painful, running a marathon. So a couple of days later I went back to the pool and I could do it again. And I was like, where did this come from? So I realized I had been taking Pilates for a number of 3 years. And my Pilates instructor was another influential person in my life. And she smacked me in the back of the head. And she says, where do you think you got that from? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You take, core awareness and you create a nice posture and you put it in the water like this and it goes through really nicely. So from there, I started to set some goals because swimming was effortless for me all of a sudden. And so I threw down a challenge of the English Channel, which is a 21-mile crossing from Dover, UK to Calais, France. And my journey there was in fits and spurts. I did a lot of research to make sure I knew how to train. I talked to a lot of mentors on what were the right things to do. And the year prior, I had set up some long swims to test myself. One was a 15-mile swim across Long Island to Bridgeport, and I didn't finish. I was pulled from the water by my boat captain. It was a rough day. I was a quarter mile from the end. I could see the banners and the balloons. And this was a cancer thing like the team in training runs I told you about. And I'm like, you don't stop somebody when they're that close to the finish line. But I thought it was because the harbor master said, the race is over. And so that mentally drained me because my captain, which I signed up for, I do whatever they say, pulled me from the water. And a few weeks later, I was set up to do a 25-mile swim, and I made it about maybe halfway before I popped a rib head in my back, so with a mechanical problem. And this is about now 10 months before my attempt for the English Channel. So I went into chiropractic rehab for about 3 months, and around Christmas time, Carol and I wrote what we call an intention wall. We wrote it on the wall in our basement. And the first thing she wrote on there was, Bob swims the English Channel. And I was thinking, Bob's going to beg for his deposit back. This is a lot of money to do these events. And so she was very supportive, another influencer for me. And so in January, I went back into the pool and I could find my groove again. My back was okay. I was able to ramp up my training. And I had set some goals along the way. I wanted to be the kid from New Hampshire that joined the list of about 1,500 at the time that had crossed the channel. And about 3 months prior to the swim, we had the freak snowstorm, smashed a tree limb, smashed our skylight, and I was up trying to cover it on my roof, trying to cover it with a big oversized piece of plywood, and I slid off the roof and fell and landed like a ballerina on one of my feet. And so I dislocated all the bones in my upper part of my foot between the toes and the ankle bone. And I had to go to the trauma surgeon. The trauma surgeon was like, the first surgeon was like, yikes, I can't touch that, you have to go to a specialist. And so I went to the specialist, and literally it was like Doogie Howser. So now I have this like very traumatic injury that a very experienced surgeon in Exeter decided to pass off. And he looked at it and he's like, yeah, this is gonna be, ooh, yeah, boy. So you're gonna be like on like no weight bearing activity for 4 months. And I'm like, well, I get this little thing coming up, swim, you know, and it's like in 3 months. And he says, well, what kind of swim? And I told him the channel, and he says, well, he goes, you're going to be on your back for like 5 weeks. So why don't we get through the surgery, and we'll take a look at your foot after the fact. So after the fact, 5 weeks later, and I did what he said. I was on the couch for 5 weeks. He looked at it, and he loved the x-rays and all of his fine work. The screws were all in the right place. The spacing was perfect. And so I said, so about that English Channel thing. And he says, look, I can't tell you you can go swim the channel. You just lost 5 weeks of cardiovascular development. But I can approve you for non-weight bearing activity, because your weight bearing physical therapy isn't going to start till a month after your swim. So I'm like, so swimming isn't weight bearing, right? And he said, yeah, you can swim, but you can't step on it, you can't bump it, thump it, bang it, ding it, anything. So I said, I've got to try. And if I was going to fail at the channel, it wasn't going to be in New Hampshire. It was going to be in Dover, UK. So I, with the help of a lot of friends and my family, and especially Carol, who drove me to the beach and took my crutches back from the beach to the blanket and drove me to the ponds all over the state of New Hampshire to get as much training in the remaining 8 weeks as I could in. And even strangers came up on the beach. Like, I would get out of the water one day and Carol would be working, my friends weren't available, and I came out after a couple of hours of swimming, and it's low tide, and I'm looking up at my crutches. And so this nice couple that was visiting from New Jersey or somewhere, they'd be walking hand in hand, and I'd be sitting there on the beach with the waves, you know, kind of like, can you give her brother a hand? And like, what's going on? And I'm like, can you get my crutches, you know? But people took an interest because more than a few people helped out that were strangers that were just renting homes for the summer, and they would, you know, come up to Carol and my friends. They'd see the crutches and they'd say, how far is Bob going today? So it was really cool to have all of a sudden this community wrapped itself around me while I was, you know, struggling to chase my dream. So I finally make it over to the UK, and kind of to pick the pace up of the story up a little bit. I got my phone call for the day to go swim. And the boat captain said, so seas are a little questionable for all the nautical people out there. They said the conditions are what they, on a Beaufort scale of force 1 to 2, which is somewhere less than 5-mile-an-hour winds and maybe a 2-foot wave or so. But we don't know what's going to happen after that. But you said you have swum in some tough conditions, and I told them about the broken foot. That wasn't the tough conditions they were thinking about, they could care less. It was more about what I experienced in New York. And so they said, you know, we're going to go. But if you decide that you don't want to swim, we're not going to ask somebody else. So I'm like freaking out because I'm crutching all over town in Dover. And we went out at 4 o'clock in the morning, and as soon as we got past the wind shadow of England, the winds kicked up. And I was in now force 4 and force 5 conditions, which is 12-mile-an-hour plus sustained winds with 8-foot rolling swells. And I just knew that with all these people that supported me, I had to do them proud. I had to do myself proud. And I just practiced what I had done. My job was to turn the paddles my crew's job was to point the boats in the right direction, feed me on regular intervals, and one of my mentors told me, they said, don't look for France. Because when you lift your head up, your body sinks, and then you plow a lot more water. So I just kept my head down, and I just kept turning the paddles, and after 10 hours and 50 minutes or so, I finally crawled on shore on the coast of France. So I really thought it was a fluke, right? I did, because there's a lot of, you know, you broke your foot, you're crawling in and out, you know. And so I decided to set another challenge for myself just to make sure I wasn't a one-hit wonder. And that was to, seriously, you know, that was to take on what they call the Triple Crown of open water swimming, which is the English Channel, a swim around Manhattan Island, which is 28.5 miles, and then a little over 20-mile swim from California to the Southern California coast. So the New York swim was a lot easier. It's a current-assisted swim, so they time it, your swim with your swimmability so that you always swim with the current around the 3 rivers. And so that one went off without a hitch. And it turns out that that year my time was the fastest of anybody else who swam that year. This is not about me talking about my times, right? So I'm getting to that inspirational part. Right? So the last swim was the Catalina swim, and this one was the toughest mentally because I knew there were sharks in the water. You watch too much Shark Week. You know, part of my research, you need to know everything you need to know about your environment. And so that swim starts in the middle of the night. And yeah, 10 minutes of 11, I dropped in off the Catalina coast, and I have a big boat and a kayaker that guide me along the way. And my kayak broke down after 4 hours or so. It was one of those pedal drive, mirage drives. So I got wrapped up in seaweed or some lines or something, and they hollered from the big boat, hey, we have to fix the kayak. And so I'm like, now I'm stopped. My brain starts to think about what's beneath me. Because I'm not moving. When I'm moving, I'm thinking about my stroke, trying to be as efficient as I can. And ultimately, I had to make the decision to sit there or to swim on. And I chose to keep moving, because if it was going to happen, I didn't want it to happen in front of everybody in the boat. And I wanted to be swimming when it happened. And so what seemed like an hour, but was probably more like a few minutes, and one of the crew said it was more like, you know, about 10 minutes, and I don't believe that. The big boat finally caught up to me. And I ultimately went on to finish that swim. And that's when I became the first person from New Hampshire to do that. So all of this skill kind of, so this newfound skill kind of, I feel like it kind of hit me in the chest and bounced off, and I'm just, you know, blessed. And I thought back in my life to, now what can I do to give it back? And so along the way, people would see me swim and they're like, wow, I need to learn what you're doing. So I started to hold swim clinics for nonprofits. I'm a big part of the Save the Indoor Portsmouth Pool program that was a joint partnership between a nonprofit in the city where we worked together to rejuvenate the pools, you know, basically cost and revenue structure. They were very open about that. Plus we committed to raise $750,000 to upgrade the pool facility. And that was a huge success. The pool is still open today. They had a nice swim meet today, which was great because we got kids involved, which was fun. Not that there aren't kids swim teams and all of that, but we had parents and kids swimming together, competing with each other. So you have really fast, you know, ex-collegiate swimmers, and you got Emily Erickson, who's this tall, and it was just the cutest, right? And so that was a big part of my give back was to the Portsmouth pool, and also the swim team that helped make me successful, which was Great Bay Masters, which is Masters is like a national organization with chapters around the country. And so I've taken that, and you know, Jen mentioned that that there was a documentary film made. I was invited to be a TEDx speaker a couple of months ago. And it just all just kind of drove me back to, you know, what can I do to give back? So I look at, you know, the people that influenced my life, the trigger point of team and training, and now this skill that I've come up with. And what I wanted to leave you guys with is there might be some parallels for you in that story somewhere. And if there are, I wanted to encourage you to take one of your passions, whether it's newfound or yet to be discovered, and as Jen said, try to take that and package it and give it back. It's very easy for us to make a donation or give goods, but when you can give your time and your knowledge, you can actually impact somebody on or a group or an organization in the community on a small level. And if there's probably 100 people in here at least, so if we all found a way to do that in our own specialty area, we would definitely leave this earth with at least impacting our community a little bit. If we could do that all across the world, you know, then the world would be a better place. So the last thing that I wanted to say is, while you're pursuing that, and don't be freaked out, I'm not going to take all my clothes off. I wanted to leave you with a thought from an open water standpoint. Hopefully. And it's just 3 words. So don't set any limitations on how you can impact society. You can probably bring inspiration to a large community or a small community. I've taken a skill that I've developed, and I'm trying to impact those that swim or want to swim. And my next focus, this all started with adults because I swim with adults, but you know, we're older folks, and that fear of the water as you get older just ingrains deeper and deeper. And I always say this: thank you, Steven Spielberg. Thank you, Shark Week. You know? But you know, now I'm trying to go down to the next generation. So I volunteer race direct for some organizations, and this year I helped volunteer for the Double Light Swim, which is from long sands to short sands, and we raised $15,000 for the national awareness for mental illness, and it helped promote. Thank you. And I helped promote a swim challenge for the YMCA in Exeter, and we had 100 registered swimmers, but we had 46 kids from local swim teams. And that was just amazing. That's the group I want to help, you know, and help bring them to the open water. So in short, that's kind of my story. So no lanes, no lines, no limits for your passions in life. And start with your passion, because when your passion comes out, it becomes contagious, and that's kind of what inspiring is all about. So find that passion and run with it. Yeah. Thank you.
Coming up next is Tina Hurley. Tina is a warrior. Since being diagnosed, yeah, that's right. Since being diagnosed with a rare vascular disease, she has had 13 surgeries, including amputation and amputation revisions, one of which was just 3 weeks ago. Rather than backing down to adversity, Tina faces it head-on with grace, curiosity, and tenacity. She is a leading adaptive CrossFit athlete and a beacon for inspiration. Please welcome to Impact Portsmouth, Tina Hurley.
So, first of all, my name is Tina Hurley, as she said, and I'm very, very humbled and honored to have the opportunity to speak to you today. And as Jen had mentioned, it's a little bit inopportune timing in relation to my life, and I'll go into why timing has been challenging, but how kind of serendipitous it is to give a conversation and topic about persevering and overcoming adversity when I'm really still in the thick of my processes with this whole situation. So 4 years ago, I had everything. I had a budding relationship with someone who I thought was the man of my dreams, with a marriage that was definitely going to result from it. I had a brewing, amazing professional career as a PA with one of my very special mentors that's in the audience today that I'm very honored could be here. I had financial security. I had life just by the horns. I was a significant, at the time, not adapter, but significant athlete in CrossFit that was on track for regionals and just really getting into the groove of my physicality. And I had 2 legs. And I met my to-be husband at a pool in Las Vegas. I'd gone there on a whim, single girl. A friend called me and said, come over for the weekend. I have a friend that lives off Strip, and we'll just go downtown whenever we want, and we'll just figure it out as we go. I said, sure. So I booked my flight that night. That Thursday I flew out, and the next day I was in MGM Wet Republic's pool party. Never did anything like that. And all of a sudden this 6'7" person swims up to me and looks at me and goes, Tina, CrossFit New Hampshire? And I immediately was concerned about my safety. Ooh, this is the kind of situation my mom warned me about. But the aesthetics were there, and I felt pretty comfortable. And it turned out I had met him at my CrossFit gym 3 months earlier, and remembered this sort of, socially awkward guy that was, handsome and charming, and we had a lovely evening. And I knew after that moment that he was the one for me. There was no question, there was no doubt. And I got back to New Hampshire, and it was fast track. We had met essentially 3 months earlier, gas mask jump roping in a CrossFit gym, and I felt sort of bad because once he moved in 3 months later, I sort of bait and switched because then I ended up not being able to walk. So as I started to progress in my CrossFit career, I very quickly recognized that barbell movements or bodyweight movements or anything where I was on the bars, I excelled at it as a former gymnast and someone that was very, very defined by my physicality. I grew up in competitive cheerleading and was very athletic and was a personal trainer, and ended up pursuing a degree in exercise physiology and had done that and training for quite a long time. And so I had a natural predisposition to being decent at the movements. And then what I recognized was any workout where there was, say, 12 kettlebell swings, 21 pull-ups, and then you go for a 200-meter jog, and you repeat that a couple of times, I'd tear off the bar, 40 seconds sooner than the last athlete. And then all of a sudden, everybody would be passing me in a 200-meter run because my legs would seize up, my calves would cramp, left greater than right, and then my feet would go numb. And I'd have to stop and let everyone pass me, and I'd get back to the gym, and it took a long time for those symptoms to abate. And I made every excuse that I could for it, and I thought back in my history, when I was younger, as much as I was an athlete, I never pursued anything endurance-wise. I never really jogged a lot. Jogging for fun wasn't my jam. My legs would cramp up. I just attributed it to, I was a gymnast. I hit the floor wrong, my ankles pushed down, I have the wrong shoes, I'm dehydrated, I didn't eat enough bananas, whatever the thing is that you tell yourself to prevent your mind from going to that worst case scenario. And at the time I started to begin dabbling in medicine. I was working as a medical assistant, essentially, but with some opportunities that were beyond that because the physician that I worked for was a preceptor for a PA program. And I ended up recognizing pretty quickly that as I progressed in my CrossFit, gym and workouts, that what I was suffering from wasn't normal. It wasn't that I didn't need to, couldn't stretch. It wasn't that I hadn't prepared. It wasn't hydrated. It wasn't my shoes. There was something wrong. And so when I graduated with my PA degree, I began working in the hospital and learning more about vascular medicine and acute care medicine. And I had some friends that had this condition called exertional compartment syndrome, which is common in young athletes that have a lot of muscle tone. And so I went and had that evaluated at an outside facility, and they said, you have a calf sprain. Okay, well, I'm not sure sprain is the right word, but we can pursue that. Okay. So they sent me for an ultrasound, and they ruled out a blood clot, which I didn't have, and I advocated for an orthopedic consultation. And I went to an orthopedist, and they did compartment pressure testing, which is this kind of archaic procedure where they stick a bunch of needles in your legs down into the fascia, the 4 compartments of your lower leg, and then they have you run on a treadmill until you can't go anymore, and your symptoms are so bad you just want to fall off. And then they stick the needles back in your leg, and they tell you, yay or nay, your pressures are elevated. Your blood engorges the muscle, it exceeds the space in the fascia, and it self-asphyxiates. It cuts off the blood flow to itself, and that's what happens to create your symptoms. And we can just cut you from your knee to your ankle, and we can relieve the fascia, but only 35 to 45% of people actually get improved with this. And we're talking about doing this incision from your knee to your ankle in 3 different spots on your leg. And at this point, I could still walk, at work. I could still, do small functions that I wanted to do. And I felt that at that point I had no scars, and that was very aesthetically concerning for me. So as I got a job at Elliott Hospital, of course you're incentivized to go to the hospital that you work at for financial reasons for the insurance companies, and I had to start fresh. And over the period of that year and a half that I was waiting to get into the physicians at that new hospital, the symptoms had gotten so bad in my legs that I couldn't take my dog for a walk around just one block. Because at the end of the block, there was a slight incline, and I would have to stop every 10 or 15 minutes because my legs would just feel like I had cinder blocks. I was just dragging cinder blocks. And I remember thinking, there's something wrong. I don't have a calf strain. And I don't think it's just this compartment syndrome because I'm just walking. That shouldn't be enough to cause such significant symptoms. But what do I know, right? So I ended up going to a wonderful primary care physician through Elliott, and she could just sympathize. She didn't know the specialty stuff, the orthopedics, or what would have been the next course. And she sent me to the orthopedist through the hospital, and this doctor was awesome. And she said, we can do this fasciotomy, where they cut your fascia, and we can do a smaller incision and do a blind cut. So you'll have smaller incisions, and if it fails, it fails, and at least you won't have as big of scars. And I'm like, that's kind of a good idea. And if it's going to make me feel better, then I'm willing to do it, because at this point, my life is quite impaired by it. And I said, my mother just had stents put in her arteries for atherosclerosis and plaque in her arteries. Could there be anything that's not orthopedic related that could be related to my symptoms? And she said, well, rare things, but peace of mind is really important, so why don't you consult with a vascular surgeon, and then when things are good, you can come back to me and we can proceed with this procedure. I'm like, okay. So I go to the physician who, of course they're all colleagues of mine because I work in the same hospital. And I go to him and he checks my pulses at rest and my feet, and they're bounding and beautiful. And then I squeeze my calves down and I push my feet really, far down, and he can't feel anything on either of my legs, no pulses. And he kind of furrows his brows, and he doesn't believe it. He pulls out his Doppler, the thing where you can hear blood flow, and he puts them on my legs when I'm just at rest, and you hear, perfect. And then as soon as I flex my calves and I push my toes down really hard, in any location below my knee, there was nothing. And it was related to symptoms, and my legs started to hurt as I did it. And he kind of just did this sigh and rolled back, and he said, I think you have a zebra. And in medicine, we're, as PAs and residents and anyone that learns medicine, you're taught to think of the things that kill people first, and you want to make sure you rule those things out. It's very important. But common things are common because you see them often, and so your attendings will always tell you, think of horses if you hear hoofbeats. Don't think of the zebras, keep them in your mind, but first think of horses. So as soon as he rolled back and said you had a zebra, I knew I was going to be along for quite a ride. And at that point, I was working in hospitalist medicine, and my relationship was progressing significantly with my significant other. We were moving towards buying a house, and we had a dog, and there was this parallel of this really tenuous medical course and this really lovely relationship that was budding. So the search began for getting the diagnosis confirmed through imaging studies and going to a slew of physicians all along the East Coast, because the condition is called popliteal artery entrapment syndrome. So through different testing, CT scans and angiography studies in provocative positions, dye tests where they actually go into your arteries and inject it into your arterial tree and take x-rays, when I would squeeze my calves, sure enough, 2 centimeters above the joint line over both of my knees, all of my arteries just pinched off. And this condition is a limb-threatening issue because over time, that impingement on your vessel creates thickening in the wall of the vessel as a compensatory mechanism that ends up blocking the artery, much like older folks who get atherosclerosis, but it's sort of just a different process. And so the idea is to intervene surgically as soon as possible to relieve the entrapment before the artery is in a position where it needs to be replaced, because it's sort of a slippery slope from that point moving forward. So after 6 to 8 months of just being terrified and in pain and having no answers and having that guy to go to, I ended up going to this Leahy down in Burlington, because the head of their department had seen about 5 or 6 cases over his 33 years. And 4 out of 5 of those were traumatic cases where it was an acute trauma that caused them. So there's 6 types of this condition. The first 4 are anatomic, where there's an actual anatomic reason that the artery is being entrapped. You have a small piece of calf muscle that's laying over, you have some connective tissue that's laying over, there's something specific that you were made with that shouldn't be there, and they can go in and take it out and problem solved. And then the other 2 are the more rare forms of this rare condition where it's a functional issue. It ends up that the neuromuscular recruitment to your lower extremity creates a functional and dynamic entrapment, which is very hard, as you can imagine, to replicate when you're intraoperative and you're sedated and you're under anesthesia and you're paralyzed and you can actually move your leg. So the surgeries began, the diagnosis was about 4 years ago, and the surgeries began about 6 months after that, and the first one was the first debulking procedure. They went through the back of my leg, and they opened it up, and they took a peek, and they saw that there was, in fact, a small area of calf that sort of spanned over the artery. They said, well, this might be it. Doesn't look like it's big enough to cause the issue, but we don't want to go any further if that's what it is. So they took it out, they stitched me back up, sent me on my way. 2 weeks later, I'm at the grocery store, I'm walking around, and it's the same symptoms. And you know when it's different and you know when it's the same. And then it was the jumping through hoops, the having to convince that it was in fact the same, the reimplication of testing, and in fact it was entrapped on confirmatory testing. So they took me back again for a more extensive debulking, and this time they chose to, it was February 4th of 2014, they chose to do it in a prone position, face down, and they wanted to go through the back of my leg again and really open things up and dissect out as much of the tissue that they could and take down as much as they could to make it done. This is going to fix you. Every time I went in, this is going to fix you. And when they went in, they took out as much as they could, half of my calf, a bunch of additional structures. They did the fasciotomies where they actually cut through the fascial tissue. And when they went to go close, they did a Doppler right before they closed, and they recognized that my artery was too blocked to leave alone. That even if the debulking was successful, they had to replace the artery or my symptoms were going to be the same because my artery wall had just been really abysmal. So unexpectedly and unfortunately unconsented, they had to turn a 3.5-hour procedure into a 7-hour procedure to take out my arm, get my arm draped and prepped, and harvest 7 centimeters of my arm vein to replace the artery in my leg in the same anatomic space as the entrapment. So I woke up from that procedure, and of course 7 hours on my face in one of the donut pillows. And I woke up from anesthesia, and many of you probably had surgeries. You kind of wake up and you start to get, you get your ground, and you're not really sure what's going on, and the medications make you happy. And within a number of minutes, I recognized that something was terribly wrong with my eye. And within minutes, I mean, it was so severe that I remember just screaming in the post-anesthesia care unit, and they rushed an ophthalmologist into PACU, and I ended up having a 60% corneal abrasion because my eye had been partially open during the large bulk of the procedure. So they put out that fire, and they took care of it, and gunked up my eye, and that pain subsided. And pretty shortly after that acute pain subsided, I remember brushing my chin, and I couldn't feel it. It was like I had just had my teeth worked on, you know, that Lidocaine feeling? Novocaine feeling? And I looked at my husband, well, my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, is there something wrong with my chin? He's like, Tina, it's really swollen. You look like you have a Jay Leno chin. I don't think that's normal. And then my forehead started to swell, and within about a 12-hour period, pustules erupted on my chin and my forehead in a very dramatic pattern. I couldn't open my jaw more than a centimeter. And I've never had a migraine before, and I guess I really never had a true appreciation for what a migraine is. But they called it a traumatic migraine from having been on my face for so long. There was no repositioning that had happened, unfortunately. And when they do vascular surgeries, they tip you up so your legs are elevated. And so I was literally resting the weight of my body on my face for 7 hours. And so they ended up being, once they got infectious disease and neurology involved and all these different people involved and had me on a patient-controlled analgesic drip, they ended up finding out that these were necrotic facial pustules. My skin had died from the pressure over 7 hours. And the pain from those facial complications were so excessive, I couldn't feel my surgical pain at all. The pain was so severe that I was hitting the patient-controlled analgesic button so much, and the threshold wasn't appropriate for my size, that it ended up putting me in respiratory failure, and I coded the evening prior to my 30th birthday 3 years ago. So I woke up in the intensive care unit, and within 2 days, they had me pretty managed on a medication regimen. But as you can imagine, pretty traumatic. As part of the resuscitation, once they get you stabilized, they administer Narcan, and that makes you go from pain control to you feel everything. And then you get rushed to the ICU, and they have to strip you down and bathe you in an antimicrobial solution and swab you everywhere for different kinds of things, and very, very traumatic. And so I was discharged to go home, and within about 2 weeks of walking, I had earplugs in and a mask on my eyes because I was so photophobic and phonophobic, I couldn't function from the migraine perspective or eat because my jaw wouldn't open. And I remember thinking, you know, this is all worth it if it fixed me. I can deal with this is temporary. And I was walking in the grocery store about a month later with my earplugs in and my sunglasses on, and it was the first time I'd been out of the house, and I was walking down the aisle, and I felt the same exact symptoms as I had felt before my surgery. And I knew it was the same. And so I just melted down. My boyfriend was there. I collapsed into his arms. We both were crying. It was just very disappointing because that was supposed to fix me, right? Expectations. So I went back to the same place, and I decided that I would pursue another surgery, the third and final process of debulking in the same institution, and they would keep me face up so that my face would continue to heal. Because I needed to get it done as soon as I could because I'd taken so much time off from work already. And so they went in the side of my leg that time, and they took out as much as they could, half of my lower leg, and sewed me back up and sent me on my way. And within 4 to 6 weeks after that recovery, my leg was the same. And the surgeon said, you know, unfortunately, there's nothing more that I have to offer you. At this point, your artery is so down that we're going to have to bypass you. And the implications on that with a person that I was with and wanting to start a family were quite significant. Because the medications that they need to put you on when you have a bypass graft are things that you really shouldn't be conceiving on. And so we started to have this discussion about how our lives were going to change because of the leg. How much of my life plan is going to be taken away from because of my leg. So a few months later, he proposed to me that summer, and it was beautiful. The engagement was stunning. He put so much effort into it. And I remember thinking, like, how lucky am I to have this parallel of the most wonderful time of my life to the most horrible time of my life, and how empathetic am I to people in life that suffer these kinds of tragedies that don't have that same support. So I had such gratitude for having that as my safety net. So we ended up pursuing a femoral popliteal bypass using my vein in my leg in March of 2015. And that was going to fix me. That was the thing. And you're going to get, you know, studies show that you get 10 to 15 years of patency, but you're a person that doesn't have any vasculopathic risk factors, so you might be able to ride for this, you know, forever. I'm like, okay, well, that sounds good, let's do it. So they took out, you know, all the vein in my leg, and most of the vein in my leg, and they bypassed it, and you know, it's outside of the anatomic space this time. They superficialized it to the top of the vessel, and so how could it be entrapped when it's not in the area of entrapment? And about 4 or 5 weeks later, the symptoms were the same. And I had to prove it with testing because it was so inconceivable how I could still have refractory symptoms despite having done what was the procedure for this. So they started to discuss grand rounds, multi-center grand rounds with my case. They discussed the case with the researchers in Wisconsin that write the research on this stuff because it's so rare, to figure out how we were going to save the limb of this young person. And they said, we don't have any additional suggestions, it's just bypasses at this point. And the reason my bypass had failed is because I had another, unfortunately, significant complication of something called intimal hyperplasia, which is scar development inside of where they sew the arteries. When you're young, you have a robust reaction to surgeries because you have a healthy immune system, and it lays down scar tissue along the margins of the sutures, and it ends up occluding the vessels at the plug-in sites above and below. So about 4 weeks before my wedding, I had a follow-up ultrasound because I had pushed the entire summer, and I was like, I am not going back to a hospital. Not having the surgery, I'm going to will it away. I've got a wedding to plan. I'm too busy doing DIYs. I got to like paint vases. I got shit to do. And the ultrasound showed my graft was down, and if we didn't intervene like immediately, it was a limb-threatening issue. So he said, I think it's just the top and the bottom of your graft, and so we're going to take some more vein and we're going to patch both sides, and the lumen of the rest of the vein should be wide open. I think it's a flow issue. Okay. So we went in, he took more vein, he patched the 2 areas, and then a day later, I remember the PA that was also my colleague came by and rounded and tried to check pulses and didn't find them. And they do a terrible job of hiding at bedside. You can tell. I was laying there, and I sort of omitted the fact that I actually had transitioned from hospital medicine to vascular surgery to be a better advocate for my mother and myself, and to know the referral systems and to learn the tests and to be my own professional. So I was also working in the field, and so I knew what was going on. And so, of course, he came in later that day after the ultrasound and said, your whole graft is down, I was wrong, we have to replace the entire thing. So this is 4 weeks before my wedding. He took all the remaining vein from my leg all the way up to my groin, and he bypassed the entire graft. And 2 days later, I was functional, I was controlled on oral medications, and my bridal shower was that Sunday. And I begged them to let me go home because I didn't want to miss my bridal shower. I didn't want this situation to rob me of any more time in my life. And I had the most beautiful white tulle skirt picked out. And my family, my friends had made the most amazing, venue, and I had family flying in from all over. And damn it, I want a good memory. I deserve a good memory, so I'm going to get there. I'm going to check out AMA if I have to. And so they let me go home, and that morning, I hadn't allowed myself a ton of self-pity along the way, right? You're in crisis and survival mode, head down, plowing forward. And that morning, I had stripped down, and I was getting ready to do my little sponge bath because I couldn't shower because I had a wound vacuum on, and I just looked down, and I looked at my beautiful white tulle skirt and my outfit and my high heels, and I just remember thinking, I can't believe I'm right here right now. Like, I thought my whole life would be different. I should be somewhere else, right? I should have something else. My life should have been different. These things should have fixed me. And it was the first time I allowed myself that amount of self-pity and acceptance of what was going on, and I just doubled over with, I don't know that I've cried that hard ever, and I mean guttural sounds coming out as I was folded over this stool in my bathroom, and then I felt a pop in my leg. And I looked down, and the tubing filled rapidly with bright red fluid. And I recognized pretty immediately that I was hemorrhaging from my leg. And so my leg started to visibly distend. And of course, I'm naked in my bathroom. Why wouldn't you be when a crisis occurs? And so I throw myself on the ground because I'm aware of what's going to happen and how many liters you can hold of blood in your leg. And I'm like yelling to my husband, and he comes in, and I'm like, you can lose 3 to 4 liters in your leg, and if I lose consciousness, this is what you have to do, and call 911, but make sure that my legs get up in a position of shock, and throw me a towel. And he grabs my stepfather, who's living at the house at the time, and my stepfather runs in, and he shows him how to kneel in my femoral artery, and he runs down and gets a tourniquet, and he tourniquets my leg, and EMS is called, and they get me to the hospital, and they rush me into surgery, and they fix the problem. This is 3 weeks before my wedding. So we laid in the bed with the professionals at bedside, and we thought, should we do this? Should we cancel? I might not be able to walk down the aisle. And we said, we have to do it. We're obligated financially. We're going to lose all this money, really. So we're going to do it. So 3 weeks later, with the help of some pharmacologic assistance, I was able to walk down the aisle and do a little dancing, which was helpful. So we got married on the 10th of October 2015. And it was great, right? Magical, beautiful situation. 6 weeks later, my leg was back to how it had always been. So they said, we can do endovascular procedures where we go through your groin and we snake down and we can blow it up with a balloon, but it's only going to be short term, and we need to start talking about limb loss. And I was like, buy me some time, that's a lot to chew on. And so he ballooned it open. I could hardly walk into the facility when I went to have the test, and I could walk out of it like nothing, and I ended up going for a 3-mile walk that day. And it lasted for about 4 to 5 weeks. It was amazing getting a chance to even just walk, appreciating the little things. And then it happened again. He ballooned it open again, and then we fell into the right surgeon's hands, and we decided that we were going to have an elective amputation because it was the way to regain some life. So we had a farewell party for my leg, At that point, I had never had a tattoo. I did this like big henna tattoo, wild and crazy. And it was a big fundraiser. My community came together and they were able to fundraise some money for all my medical bills that were astronomical, and my leg prosthetic. And the community banding together and the support from all my loved ones and even just strangers, people that came out of the woodwork. But one of the things that I reflect back on and think, I want to be that for other people. Because just that support, those hugs, those kindness gestures, the smile when you're standing in a line at a store, all of those things amounted to something significant because I really felt like a ghost of a person at the time. So to sort of speed things up, because I know we're crunched for time, I ended up having a follow-up because my leg didn't go well. The revision, I had significant complications from the surgery that needed a revision. And I had a big wound because I got delirious in the hospital after my amputation, and I fell on it and it pulverized the tissue, and I had to scrape it clean in September as another surgery and apply a wound vac. And day after my 1-year wedding anniversary, he felt sick. He didn't want to go out for our anniversary. And we had been a little bit strange because I was blowing spit bubbles on pain medication and he was working the night shift. The next day I had gone down to my follow-up appointment in Connecticut and I came back and all of his stuff was gone. 3-4 house, 2 dogs, half a leg with a wound vac, and no husband. And I tried calling and I tried texting and I couldn't get anybody. And a couple of days later, I got a message that said, I'm really sorry, I can't do this anymore. And I begged, can we go to counseling? So he met me at the first counseling session and she said, I need a verbal commitment that you guys both want to work on this. And I said, of course, I didn't recognize we were going to get here. This is crazy, we've been through trauma, we must be an adjustment disorder. Like, we are fairy tale love. Of course, this isn't what this is not the way it ends. And she looked at him, and I'll never forget, he sat there very robotically, and he said, I agree with committing to this process for not the purpose of reconciliation, but for the purpose of an enhanced communication for a more amicable parting. And the counselor, who's supposed to be completely neutral, just and looked at me, and I'm just, falling. So, he left in October of last year, and I had a visceral response to it. I curled up in a ball, and I let the world crush me. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't move around because I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep. And ended up going back to work part-time 2 weeks later because I had to get out of my house or I was just going to go crazy. And I got to work my first day and the nurse said, how are you? It's the worst question you can ask someone when they're visibly not okay. How are you? Don't do it. So I was like, and then she's like, I'm going to shut your door and cancel your patients and just stay here in case there's a fire to put out, but just chill and get your shit together. So I applied for SSDI, or tried to, and then I emailed a CrossFit gym, and I said, my life is unraveling, my leg was removed, my husband just left me, and if I don't get community and physicality, I really don't know how I'm going to make this work. I had not been in a CrossFit gym for 3 years because the frustration of not being able to do what I used to do was overwhelming compared to what I got out of it. And so I lost a lot of my identity in not being able to do that, and was isolated. And they said, just get here. We don't care that you can't pay, just come to us. And I began re-identifying and getting back into adaptive exercises, and there was a wonderful woman that was an adaptive wheelchair athlete there that was so inspirational to me my first day. And I started to get my groove back, some confidence back. This abandoned, betrayed, disfigured, hollow shell of a human started to redefine those words. And I decided to get away for the holidays, on crutches, with half a leg, with a wound and a wound vac hanging off. I went to Hawaii, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I hiked the trails in the road to Hana. I one-leg surfed. I drank tequila on New Year's Eve with the best of them. I just shook it out. Big birds, And I started to okay, I can do this. I'm validated, I can do this, I can get through this. And why I can get through this is because people love me. No matter what I do now moving forward, as long as I own what I have, I've been gifted a purpose. We all search our whole lives for what our purpose is. And someone's just wrapped one up for me with a beautiful bow and said, here, do what you want with it. Am I going to do that lay in bed thing? Am I going to do that curl up in a ball thing and neglect this opportunity? Or am I going to serve it by trying to live my life as fulfilling for myself as possible with a secondary effect of inspiring others, because if I can do it, someone else feels like maybe they can do it. I'm going to do that. So I started to train for CrossFit big CrossFit competitions, was quite successful, had another surgery March 1st of this year when they had to revise my amputation again, continued to compete in a 5-week workout series despite having the amputation the second week of it and placed second in the international division. And ended up going on through the summer and continuing to do the same. Needed to have another revision and found out in August, just a couple of months ago. And at the same time, I went and did a CrossFit competition online qualifier for Wadapalooza, which is this really great Miami international competition, and knew that I needed to get the surgery done by the winter because a new surgeon was starting at my office in September, and I didn't want to burden the office by leaving again. And I found out 2 weeks before that date that she was supposed to start that they were rescinding the offer for her and they were going to be laying me off. So I had to rush my revision, rush my FMLA forms in, and I just had my surgery a month ago where they redid the whole thing, and it looks awesome. Everything is finally going really well, and I have this opportunity now to go in any direction that I want because I'm held down with nothing. So as somber of a story as it is, and as much as I sort of rambled and left out some significant portions, the message is that no matter what you go through, as long as your vision is larger than what your circumstance is, you will always succeed. And if you don't know the direction that you're going or the outcome of the direction that you're going, so long as you're taking steps or humps away from an area that you know is unhealthy or not good for you, you're going in the right direction. I've had a cold for the last 3 days, and my mind is completely foggy. And the fact I was able to just converse for that long is actually pretty amazing. I was down to knock this off. But in order to make sure that I relayed a message, I know this is supposed to be off the cuff, but I wanted to make sure that I was able to tell this to you. So if you don't mind, Jen, I'm just going to read really quickly and then I'll be done. In school, we're taught if a part of something is missing, it can never be whole. In our perfection-driven society, we're taught that being attractive is to be perfect or as close to perfect as possible. We're taught that handicapped and disabled are synonyms. We're taught that handicaps are to be regarded as weakness, and that to be handicapped refers to being in a position of disadvantage. As an amputee and someone that's suffered tremendous tragedies repeatedly for the past few years, I've learned that everything that I've been formerly taught about this has been a lie. Life is not defined by the circumstances that we face, but truly by how we face our circumstances. Trees grow stronger in stormy winds, and diamonds are made under pressure. The trials we endure introduce us to our courage. Courage isn't sailing through the times of unknown without fear. It's standing up in the face of adversity when fear arises and actively choosing to persevere. You see, your body can do anything, it's your mind you have to convince. You have to realize nothing makes us feel a certain way. We give in to those feelings. We decide what we make of each and every situation. We decide whether we break or we resist, whether we assent or we deteriorate. Our perceptions are the things that we are in complete control of. Situations by themselves cannot be good or bad. This is something, a judgment that we as humans make them to be. Shakespeare said, nothing ever good or bad, but thinking makes it so. There's a situation itself, and then there's a story that we tell ourselves about what it means. And that's often where we're wrong. It helped me in my dark times to set intentions. If you know not to which port you sail, then no wind is favorable. Choosing a path, as I've said, regardless of the outcome, allows you to move away from fear, pain, despair, and anxiety, and to hope, happiness, and success by the means of your own perspective, how you choose to perceive your life circumstances and what you choose to make of them. I choose to view my unfortunate circumstances as the reason I appreciate the fortunes around me, the wonderful people around me, the amazing opportunities that I've been afforded, my deeper understanding of life, and my heightened emotional maturity. I believe the power of will is measured by how much resistance, pain, and torture it endures, as to whether it knows how to turn these things to its advantage. I truly believe that only to the point when we expose ourselves repeatedly to annihilation is that which is indestructible found within us. We're programmed to have more faith in fear than certainty in love, and faith that the universe has our backs. We fight to maintain white-knuckle grip control over all aspects of our life. leading to undue stress, frustration, despair, and depression because it's an unattainable, never-ending set of tasks. We become the New Age Sisyphus, never able to get the boulder atop the mountain despite day in and day out struggle. By letting go of this control, stepping back with acceptance of our imperfection and ultimate lack of control, we allow the creative forces of love and positivity to work through us, and in doing so truly begin to live a rewarding, less congested, improved versions of ourselves. We start turning obstacles into opportunities, adversity into advantage, trials into triumphs. We start driving because of our struggles and not in spite of them. We accommodate and adapt, and we ultimately let that which impedes us empower us. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." We don't always know in the beginning why things are happening to us, but if we move forward, don't give up, believe in our dreams, the possibilities really are endless. Limits begin where your vision ends, and in order to succeed, you have to be a no-limits person. Most people have perfectly capable bodies, but unhealthy minds and limiting beliefs. When people ask me how I stay so positive despite losing a leg, I truly wonder how they can't be, despite having all of theirs. Every day is still a challenge for me. Right now, life is quite tenuous. My other leg's on the chopping block, and I'm not even sure if a left leg balloony amputation is what's needed. It might be above knee. But I've learned to adapt, and my new outlook is try me, not why me. I've gotten over self-pity, denial, and shock of my circumstances into acceptance, which is this blissful place where you just let things happen as they come with less kicking and screaming along the way, because you learn that none of that changes your course, it just makes you miserable in the interim. I've realized that lifting others up lifts me up. Projecting positivity makes me feel more positive. Remaining optimistic despite catastrophe always leads to unforeseen favorable outcomes. Owning my vulnerability makes me feel stronger. And believing that my circumstances are happening for me and not to me keeps my perspective in check and my hope for the future robust. Your vision has to be stronger than your circumstance. Your whys have to be strong enough that the hows figure themselves out. So my mess turned into a message. When things get hard, take it one day at a time, because life doesn't care about your plans. When one day at a time seems too much because you're overloaded, take it one moment at a time. When those moments are too tough, just focus on your breathing, and your breaths will turn into moments, and your moments will turn into days, and your days will pass, and you'll come out on the other side being much stronger for facing your adversity and suffering through it than from turning your back and hiding from it. Thank you for your attention. In closing, please join me in loving yourself, loving each other, dreaming big, and never giving up. Thank you.
Give it up for Tina one more time. So we'll do a quick intermission, but we're going to make it super quick for the sake of time. So about 5 or 7 minutes, enough time to grab a beer and take your seats. Our next storyteller, Mike Teixeira, and I have a lot in common. We both believe people need to tell their stories, and they need to do so in honest and engaging ways. You see, Mike is typically the one coaching people on how to do this. In fact, he created a whole company called Deck around this concept. Say, what? He did what? Which was very brave, by the way. He's been behind the scenes of Pachacacha and TEDx Piscataqua, but tonight we're turning the spotlight on him. This should be great. I'm so excited for this. Please welcome to Impact Portsmouth, Mike Teixeira.
Hey everyone, how are you? How you doing? I just want to start off by saying I'm honored to be in this space with you all tonight. Incredible speakers. Thank you, Bob and Tina. Incredibly brave, and the way you attacked your life and the adversity that came with it. I hope I someday have 1/10 of your strength. Thank you for sharing. But I'm going to share my little story now, so I hope you guys can enjoy it. My name is Mike Teixeira, and even though I have that funny last name, people are surprised that my first language was Portuguese. I guess because I got rid of the accent. I'm 6'1", green eyes, don't look like a Portuguese person. Yeah, but it was, and I grew up in a very Portuguese household. My parents, who's laughing? You know what that means?
My stepdad's Portuguese. Yeah, I know it.
Yeah. It means you're very Catholic, and it means you're very working class, and it means you work very hard, and if you take one moment to watch TV, you're disowned. So that's growing up Portuguese. And my parents emigrated in 1971, and in 72 I was born into the family. By 1979 I was 7 years old, and Christopher Reeve was in Superman. Remember that? Right? But my Superman was my dad. I spent all my time with him. He owned a landscaping company, and I remember driving around on hot summers with the smell of fresh grass flying around us. And this man would tell me the funniest stories. He had an opinion about everything, about government, religion, whatever. He could quote poems verbatim. We would go to a family gathering, sort of like, Portuguese gatherings sort of happened in halls like this, and Portuguese music would come on, and something called fado would start up. Anybody know what that is?
Fado.
Fado. It is basically depressed Catholic Portuguese hip-hop. I'm telling you, and it's amazing because my dad would get up and he would come up with rhymes on the spot about his life and his beliefs and how much religion meant to him, and I admired him so much. But by 1985, I was 13 years old, and that changed a little bit. We all know how 13-year-olds are. Do you know what 13-year-olds are like? I've got a 13-year-old at home, and they know everything and are bitter about everything. And my worldview was starting to shift a little bit by 13. It was Reagan's America. Rambo was on the big screen. Patriotism was flying high. And being from a Portuguese family and a little bit from, other, wasn't very easy. I stood behind my dad a lot those years as he tried to communicate, and I watched people yell at him, like, increase their volume, like that would help them him understand. I heard the word dumb Portuguese a lot. I heard greenhorn in my neighborhood a lot. And I didn't get angry, but I started to feel protective. I felt like instead of my dad being a superhero, now I needed to somehow protect him and the family. And I stepped in as best I could and tried to be that bridge of communication, which, flash forward, makes a lot of sense to where I am right now. And I learned something else really interesting back then. Because Rambo was popular, a lot of discussion about Vietnam was happening, and we were trying to reconcile as a country with the way we treated our veterans during that time, and there were a lot of books written and stuff, but I noticed a lot of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder was actually very familiar from my household. You see, my dad went to a war in Angola that nobody had ever heard about, and it was so similar. I mean, they were training these communities they thought were on their side. At night, that same community would end up attacking them. So it was a mess. And he was self-medicating with wine. Of course, that's the only way Portuguese people self-medicate, with wine, nothing else. And it was stressful in the household. Little things would blow up quickly. So I would use communication to tell a joke or bridge the communication and increase understanding really fast. But I found the fact that some stories are so similar but completely different. The Vietnam experience and the Angola experience was so similar, but yet all the details were completely different. I said, this is a key, and I don't know what to do with this now. At that point I was 13, but it started me on this journey. And I want to tell you a little bit about this journey that I took from that point on to try and understand how to use this key and turn it into a tool that I could use to help people understand each other. So I started off on the theatrical stage. It was high school. That was the first place I thought to go, that I could start to communicate, get out of my shell a little bit. And I was amazed that this old, dusty text that teachers were trying to teach me, the Shakespearean stuff, all of a sudden made sense once you got people up on their feet with lights on them and a stage behind them. And I was like, wow, that was my first lesson. There's power in bringing people to the written word and relaying that. So the next step was college. I pursued a career in acting, much to my father's chagrin. He didn't want to pay for that, but that's another story. So I went to a college for the theatrical arts. And it was there that I learned lesson number 2, that you have to surround yourself with people from all backgrounds, whether they're conservative, liberal, gay, straight, foreign, black, white. It's when you surround yourself with people from all these different walks of life that you start to understand that we all have common threads, and you start to see themes arise over and over again. So of course, after I graduate, I'll go to LA because that's where I'm really going to make a difference, right? But funny enough, in the world of glamour and glitz, I learned my next lesson, which was that communication has power, that it can make something actually happen or not. Pitching suddenly made a film happen. I worked in the licensing department at Paramount Studios. The way someone came in and talked about their t-shirt company won them the contract for, being the Star Trek official t-shirt company. So it had power, and I learned that in LA. So I came back to the East Coast, and then I ended up in the Gillette laboratory. Did you know Gillette had a laboratory? Anybody here know that? Yeah, you know that? We have a lot of similar information, so we should share that. In Boston, in the world's shaving headquarters. I worked in the personal care development laboratory with really smart people who could mix chemicals together and create deodorants that would keep you from sweating for like 24 hours. That's amazing, right? But I learned that if you present or try to relay information without a plan, it doesn't go anywhere. So I learned it's important to have a plan when you're speaking to people of where you want them to go. So that was my my Boston experience. So then I came to Portsmouth, good old Portsmouth. And in the past 10 years, woo-hoo! How many of you are from Portsmouth? Good. I'll wait. What do you guys think? Don't take over my story. So I'm in Portsmouth, and I worked for a communication agency. And through that communication agency, I learned that communications in 2017 is a complete and absolute mess. I think, do you agree?
Yes.
There's so many channels, there's so many streams, there's so many data points, and so many folks are running to all these channels to talk before they figure out what they have to say.
Yes.
And that, after a decade, made me frustrated. I felt like I wasn't making a change in the world. I was going through a divorce at the same time. It was time for a change. And then I landed in one more destination that taught me a lesson. And that was the last election. Now, whether you believe in being a conservative or a liberal or whatever, I think we can all agree that it was obvious during that election that we're very divided, and we're using dividing tactics to make our point, but getting more and more aggravated with each other. So I had enough at that point. I decided to take a jump. And I landed in my next destination. And that's founding this company called DEC, where I thought that presentations were the perfect bridge where you could stop, think about what you really have to say and the things that you really want to share with the world, and focus on that. Get that right before you go to the rest of the world and blab it across international channels and worldwide forums. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm very excited because almost like the skies open up, this just happened 6 months ago, almost like the skies opened up. The first person I worked with was a filmmaker, a Jordanian filmmaker called Sama. And she was trying to do the same thing I was doing. She had tried to get on a plane in JFK. They saw her with her head scarf on, and they tried to remove her from the plane. So from that day forward, she committed herself to using filmmaking to try and bridge the understanding divide, the same kind of divide that I was trying to bridge. So I took that as a sign, and since then, it's amazing. In 6 months, this is called the Impact Series. I've been talking about and thinking about what kind of impact I've had in the world, and I look around this room and I see Jen. I've worked with her, and the amazing, incredible things she's done. Bob, and the things he's done. He's out there inspiring people with such a great story. Deb, we work closely together to change the world, and it's amazing. I've already impacted so many people, and I'm only 6 months into this. I'm so excited about the future. So I thought today I'd try to share some lessons using my Portuguese language. I took some of the phrases from my childhood that I thought were completely idiotic, and I went back and looked at them and realized, oh my God, they have bigger lessons now that I can teach and use them as metaphors to teach. The first one cracked me up all through childhood. My dad would get really angry with customers when they'd want more and more and more, and he didn't have time or resources or whatever, and he'd say, as coisas querem galinha gorda para comer. Anybody speak Portuguese? No. That means they want a fat chicken for little money. Isn't that a great expression? And I've always remembered that, because now, when you're speaking, everybody wants to throw in stuff and plump up your speech and make it as big as possible. But you have to be realistic, and you got to think about your resources. Do you have time? Do they want to hear your message? So I use that one, don't make a fat chicken for little money, okay? Because otherwise people won't understand the thing you're saying. The other expression that I heard around my house a lot was, hey Michael, vida dish. Usually when I was going on and on about something and my mom had it, she'd say, vida dish, which means flip over the record, play the other side, which is kind of like you sound like a broken record, but I like their version of it because instead of just saying you sound like a broken record, it gives you instructions of what to do. Right? Try another tactic in communication. If something isn't landing, if you have a talk and it flops, why do it again? Why try to keep beating a dead horse? Turn the record and try a different song. I was a dumb teenager, of course, and my dad would often say to me, shake his head, and he'd often say, Tu olhas golem caranguejo, porque a frente para what's locked, which basically means you look like a crab trying to go straight, but turning your butt forward and going sideways. Now think about the people you've heard speak. How many times are they trying to go in one direction and tell you something, but they're going all the way around it? And that's such a good expression to keep in mind. And my last one.
Say that again.
Tu olhas golem caranguejo, porque virado para frente. Okay?
I'll remember that.
Yeah, and even though Portuguese was my first language, I don't practice it as much as I should anymore, so if there's any critics in the room, you can tell me what I did wrong. The last one is from my mom. Anytime I tried to pull something over on this woman, she had like a sixth sense. She always knew when I was lying. Yeah, don't they? But she would say, aquele que não conhece, cumpre-te, which means roughly, only those who don't know you would actually buy you, right? And they meant it in a mean way, but when I'm speaking to clients, it's such a great lesson to take, because if you fumble, you forget a paragraph, you're not really the expert you think you are, they'll still buy it if you own the moment. If you just say, hey, I'm here, this is my truth, I'm sharing with you. So those are the phrases that I thought I'd share with you today, and maybe hopefully you've learned something. Or you know, had some funny words you can throw out at the party. And I feel like my talk's a little short, but I hope you don't chastise me for that. But the last thing I want to leave you with is, growing up, my dad didn't really understand much of the things I was doing when I started becoming an adult. You know, design, videos, websites, that kind of stuff wasn't just in his experience level. So when people would ask him, hey, what does your son do? He would say, he's a teacher. And it would get me so mad. I would be so hurt. I'd be like, he doesn't even take the time to understand what the hell I do. He's just blankly saying he's a teacher. But he taught me yet again, that crazy old Portuguese man, because he knew before I knew that I am a teacher, and I had to arrive to this moment to understand that my impact in the world is teaching some life lessons about my past, about that pain of watching my dad struggle to relay who he was inside. And I'm damn proud of being a teacher. Thanks,
So, as you figured out, Amber is our final storyteller tonight. She is a passionate soul and mama on a mission to help women tap into their inner calling to fully own what they really want and who they really are.
Yes. Yes.
She's worked with more than just a couple of women in the room, several of us here. As a branding and business coach and host of her own podcast, Amber believes true fulfillment begins with the decision to honor what's truly sacred to you. Please welcome to Impact Portsmouth, Amber Lilyestrom.
Thank you, love. Woo! Okay, I'm so honored to be here, and I just want to salute my fellow speakers. Thank you guys for laying the groundwork and giving me some time to just get prepared myself. So thank you. Thanks for being first. That was awesome. You guys just so honored. I'll start by saying, it's always important, I'm a crier. So any other fellow criers in the house? Awesome. So I'll give you a little trick. We're going to try this. My friend Kate Northrup taught me this. When you feel like you're going to cry, just squeeze your butt cheeks. No joke. So when it happens, because it's going to happen probably for some of us, I know, I'm sorry, I should have told you this earlier. Just do that, okay? So you're going to see me maybe doing that a little bit here while I talk to you guys. Okay? All right, Jen, thank you so much for inviting me to be on this stage. And as I was preparing for this talk, I started to connect the dots on where I wanted to start with my story, and I came up with this really interesting starting line that I wasn't really aware that this was my reality. And the truth of it is that I've been public speaking since I was 5 years old. And my first gig was at the Boston Municipal Courthouse. And I was there speaking on behalf of myself as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I was testifying against my abuser. And I was walking into this courtroom that had about the same number of people that are in here. That's what it felt like to little 5-year-old me. And I was saying words that little girls are not supposed to say. I was telling a story about what had happened to me that I had told too many times and I didn't want to tell anymore. But my mom promised me that this would be the last time, that this was the grand jury, that this was going to get us the restraining order so he could never hurt us again, so that he would no longer have access to our family. So this was the last time that I had to tell this story. And I was really grateful for that, and I knew it was going to take a lot of courage to do that. And it blows my mind because I'm a mother of a 4-year-old. Yeah. And I can't imagine for 1 second my daughter standing in front of a room like this telling her story. But I also believe that God gives us what we can handle. And that's the only way that I can look at that story. Because I choose to rise. I've always chosen to rise. And so I walked into that room. I stood in front of those people. I told them my story. I waited for their judgment. And the judgment was that they believed me. We got the restraining order. And I was able to go on with my life. Hoodie pajamas, being a big sister, playing with my Barbies, because that's all I wanted to do. And so life went on. Life just went on. But as we know, when we're survivors of something, there's a lot of collateral damage that comes with it. There's a lot of pain that comes with it. And the truth is my parents were the parents of a 5-year-old who just stood in the room in a grand jury and told her story. My parents were the parents of a survivor of sexual abuse. And one of the things that happened for us was my mother's family abandoned us. They sided with my abuser. He was an extended family member. And so we lost my mom's entire family. We lost all of them. And there was a part of me at that young age that internalized that, of course, and thought, if I didn't tell what happened to me, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe mom wouldn't be so sad. Maybe my mom wouldn't have lost her mom because my grandmother abandoned us as well. And so there was a lot of weight on my shoulders at such a young age. And I learned also that telling the truth meant pain. It meant loss. It meant if I had the courage to tell my whole story and tell my whole truth, I did what they asked. I stood in front of them, I told the story. And then we lost half of our family. I was just telling them what happened, what was taken from me. And we lost all these people. And so I did what so many of us do. I learned how to please. I learned how to get love. I learned how to not lose it. I became a pleaser. I became a performer. I was really good at it. I dove into soccer. I was a Division I athlete, but leading up to that, I was a gymnast. I was a softball player. I was really good at school. Do you have any other fellow perfectionist pleasers in the house? Mm-hmm. Performers, yep. And I got all the stuff I needed there, right? I got external love. I got achievement. I got validation. And it filled me up, it was like a drug. And I knew that if I could just keep getting that next goal, keep achieving, well then everybody would love me. But I never had to love me, right? That was not something I could say because there was so much shame packed down inside of me. I had the courage to get up and tell my story, to tell my truth, and then everything fell apart. And so I learned not to do that anymore. I learned that other people's truths were more important than my own. And I started to build my life around that principle, ultimately, that deep notion. And so, of course, how else can we create control in our lives as things go on? I'm a competitive athlete, a high-level athlete. I am getting a lot of feedback for my physicality, for my body, for the ways that I'm achieving. And so I started to manipulate food. I started to control my food. It was the only thing that I could control. It was the only thing that no one else in my life really had anything to say about it, especially when I was achieving so much. I was achieving these things. I was, winning these awards. I was, my face was on the newspaper. I was the student athlete of the week at Pinkerton. Any other fellow Astros in the house? Hey, brother. And so things were good, but not inside, not in here. If someone had asked me, which no one ever did, do you love yourself? I would look at them with a weird face. I didn't even understand what that meant, self-love. I literally did not understand what that meant. And I just knew that I had to put my head down and keep on working and keep achieving because that's the place that I got love. It was like the faucet, right? And I knew that if I could control the food, if I could do the dance, I could perform, I could say the right things, I could get the straight A's, all of those things, then I was good. Solid, right? I was a rock star. People would call me that. And so then I went to college, and this continued. This same pattern, it just continued. I was living that way. I was still being this perfectionist and all the things that I was doing. I had a lot of complications with my knee. I had a bunch of knee surgeries, which was very challenging because I was not able to play. So then I was I would play my season, then I would have surgery, then I would go into recovery, and then I'd have to be alone doing the recovery thing in the recovery room by myself while my team was playing, and then figure out how to get back on the field in the fall, and I did it every season. There wasn't one season that I missed any of it. I just worked at it. I just kept going. I fell in love with my college sweetheart. We got married, and everything looked from the outside like it was literally perfect. I got my first job out of college. I ran the marketing and promotions for the University of New Hampshire Athletic Department, my alma mater. Go Wildcats! Any other fellow Wildcats in the house? Yeah. And it was joy. My job was joy. I got to teach. I got to mentor students. I got to shoot t-shirt cannons from the ice. I got to, run out on the field. I got to sing the national anthem because I like to sing. And I got to do all these amazing things. Like just again, right? Circus, like little performer, Cirque du Soleil. I loved that. That was my jam. And so this job fit the bill. But again, mind you, I can't open the refrigerator without crying most days. I can't walk into my closet without having an almost panic attack because I don't know what I'm going to wear because my clothes don't fit. Because nothing feels right. Because inside I didn't feel right. And remind you, I'm not telling my truth. I'm just performing. I'm just living along the lines of what the script that I think I'm supposed to be living, the life I'm supposed to be leading. So naturally, every 2 years I get a promotion, get my master's, become the person who's going to be the president of all the sport marketing professionals in the entire country. All of those things, right? More things to add to the resume and to the list. But if you ask me if I love myself, I look at you with a funny face and say, I don't have time for that. I have work to do. So it's operating in this world completely without myself. Completely just absent from what my real truth was. And because, we get in that pattern when we live so plugged in to others' achievement systems, to other systems, that we actually think that we're doing great, right? Because we're getting so much external achievement, accolades, support, love, affirmation, all those things, that we lose track along the way if this is what we really want. I remember this one particular day when I was standing in the hallway at the field house outside my office, and I looked down the hall. I saw my athletic director, guy I totally love my colleagues so much when I was there, still do. And I see Marty down the hall, and I see him shaking hands and smiling and laughing, bring people into his office. Maybe we had a corporate sponsorship meeting. He was really excited about it because it was going to help with the stadium and all this, and all these capital projects. I looked at him and I thought, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go in that office. I don't want to sit in that chair. Yet my whole life was leading me to the chair, right? And so it's just this complete out-of-body moment of realizing I need to make a change. And so when we're not ready to make a change, God often makes a change for us, right? And I was definitely in that position where I was not going to pull the e-brake on myself. I was just going to keep driving along. Remember, I'm a 5-year-old who stood up in front of a room of adults and told her story. I was one badass little courageous girl, right? I stood up there and I told my story. There was a lot of stuff that happened as a result of that, but I still did it. And that was something that was always the underpinning. That I tapped into her when I stood on the field and I was going to take a penalty kick. I tapped into her when I had to have a tough conversation at work. I tapped into her when I told my husband at the time that I needed a divorce because this wasn't right for either of us. Right? So she lived on in me. It's really important to highlight that person that lives on in us, that courageous version of us, that young child that is so bright and brilliant that still lives on in us. And I was forgetting her completely. I had removed her from my life. So, fast forward a few years. And I'm pregnant. There's a little thing that happened before that. I went to therapy and dealt with the eating disorder because I knew that I did not want to bring a child into the world and have that whole racket going on in my world. So I was committed to that. And it's funny, I'll add this little sidebar. I actually was diagnosed with an eating disorder by a psychologist. She said, you have an eating disorder. She wanted to give me medication. I said, I don't really want your medication. I got to work on this. This is something I need to do myself. I appreciate it. If I need it, I'll ask. I told some loved ones that I had an eating disorder. And even in telling these loved ones that I had an eating disorder, they said, well, we taught you to love yourself. We eat healthy. You look fine. I shared my truth, and I was invalidated again. So this is a theme in my life, right? I would share my truth, and then I would get this negative feedback of just like, you're making it up. So I was living my life on this loop of proving myself, and proving that I was telling the truth in every aspect, even in my first marriage. So as you can see, when we start to look over the dots of our lives, and I want to invite you as you leave today to take a moment to really get quiet with yourself and to look back over the dots of your own life, to look back at the versions of you that have chosen yourself, that have made courageous decisions, and then moments when maybe you didn't. Maybe when you hung out with the crowd in high school or middle school that wasn't really the right crowd for you and you knew it, but you're too afraid. Think of those moments of when you chose yourself and start to map that out and look what happens over time. You choosing to be here tonight, friends, it's Saturday night. You could be anywhere right now. And you all chose to come and learn from others, to hear stories of connection, to meet each other. You're choosing yourself tonight, and that is a big deal. So I want you all to give yourselves a round of applause just for that. Thank you. So I'm pregnant, and just to frame it for you, the day before my due date, I am at my home. My husband, how did I leave you out of the story? Yeah, I'm pregnant with my husband, Ben, child, and that was another. Yeah. So Ben coming into my life was me choosing myself too, and I started over this before the pregnancy, starting to make more life-giving choices. Ben was like an angel that came into my life because he loved me as I was. You were there when I was crying in the refrigerator and having meltdowns in the closet. You know, you were, and that was, yeah, I'll be forever grateful for you helping me move through that. And so we're pregnant. Our little girl that I knew was going to be there is in my belly. It's the day before her due date, and I'm feeling crampy. Remember, I've never done this before. I'm feeling crampy. I text my boss, because I was always working 24 hours a day. I said, I'm feeling a little crampy today. I think that I might be in by noon. It's the day before my due date, and I'm feeling crampy. Do you guys know what that was? I texted my sister-in-law, who's an emergency room nurse, and asked her. She said, I think you're in labor. They're 5 minutes apart. I said, oh, great, okay. So I'm home alone. He's at work. He used to be a police officer. I'm in the garage having contractions. I'm waiting for the contractions to subside, and then I'm backing out and I'm driving. Because remember, I can do everything myself. I put everything in the backpack. I've got this, even labor. And I'm driving to the hospital. It is the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Salute to all my mamas in the room. I get there and I'm thinking, I just want to run away right now. I just want to go anywhere else that I can go because it's like I knew that shit was about to get real. Get to the hospital, get in there, push for 4 hours. And nothing's happening, nothing's progressing. I have a fever, our daughter's heart rate is high, and they say we need to have an emergency C-section. So they wheel us in, we'll be able to be in, and my baby, not my husband, he wasn't allowed to be in there yet. And Jack Johnson music is playing, and we're like, this is relaxed. Okay, I made the special request. They played our wedding song, Better Together, from Jack Johnson. And they administered the spinal tap. Now, I'd had an epidural earlier, and they lay me back down on the table, and I realized within a few moments that it's starting to feel really hard to breathe. And I'm feeling this tightness in my chest, almost as if it was going sort of up like this, like my lung volume was getting shorter and shorter. And I've noticed that Jack's not singing anymore. It's really quiet in here, and everybody's really quiet. It's getting really tense in this room. I noticed that there's a mask over my face with somebody's hand doing this. I thought, that doesn't look normal. Usually you just have the little things in your nose, okay? And I realize now that I can't breathe. My breath is about this big. And I go to this place of realization that I might actually be dying right now. I cannot breathe. The look on that guy's face is not a good one. And I suddenly go into just a state of black. I'm not conscious. I'm not there. I'm not engaged with my body or with the room or anything that's happening. And I feel this overwhelming sense of loss, this overwhelming sense of, how can this be my life? And incredible clarity. Incredible clarity. This knowing that the thing I wanted to do all my life was tell my story, was write books, was empower people, was look into their eyes and help lift them, to see the true potential in them, to give them the thing that I didn't have as a child, to be able to pour that back into them, that I had been doing all the days of my life as a teacher, as a mentor, as a coach. And it was so clear for me as I'm in this state of, I'm not really doing what I want to do in my life, and there's nothing that I'm actually doing about it, and I might not even get to meet my baby. I might not get to hold her. I might not get to see his face when he holds his daughter. And from there, I went from this state of feeling such despair, such emptiness, such loss, to seeing moments, memories of the people that I love. Seeing my husband, seeing my parents, seeing my brother, seeing myself as a child, just seeing light and love in my life. And I couldn't really understand what was happening, but all I know is I felt this overwhelming sense of love. I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude just enveloping me. In this space between, in this moment of uncertainty where I thought maybe I just took my last breath, I don't know. But now what's here, what's meeting me is love and gratitude. God met me in that operating room and said, it's time. It's time to stop this game that's not the one that belongs to you. It's time to step into your purpose. And I felt like I got a little whisper, a little PS that, friends, when we die, the only thing that's there is love and gratitude and memories of the best moments of our lives. That's what I was met with. And I felt this incredible release. I felt this deep knowing that no matter what happened, whether I became conscious again, whether I died, that somehow everything was going to be okay. I felt like I knew my daughter was going to be okay because I had created a life, I had chosen a partner to do my life with that was going to make sure that she was okay, that she was loved. And that because I started having the courage to share my story, because I shared my story with my husband and my friends, that this would not happen to my daughter, that she would not have the same trajectory in life. I knew it. And I knew that my life was not for naught. I knew that what I had done so far was worthy beyond measure. And also now I had this deeper understanding of what I really wanted to do on this planet. And so I felt like I was given a second chance. In that moment of surrender, I could breathe again. I could see the operating room. I could hear the anesthesiologist say, go, 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 to the surgeon. She started the procedure, and within moments, our daughter was born. And she was healthy and no worse for the wear. And I looked at her and I thought, you have all of your fingers. That's amazing. Because somehow I thought I was going to screw that up. And then I said, please go get my husband. He has to meet his daughter. He came in the room, and Jack started singing again. And we were all together as a family for the first time. And I was changed. I was a different person. I was Ani's mom. I was Ben's wife. But I was also me. I was the me that I'd always been, that I had left behind. I had this new awareness, and I knew now that there was more, that I needed to do something different. Now, I didn't leave the operating room, obviously, and like run and quit my job and start doing all this stuff. It took some time. I had a lot of complications after the surgery that we really needed to work out. I had to figure out how to be a mom. I had to figure out how to breastfeed For the love, that is not easy. God, they do not give you an owner's manual for that baby when you leave the hospital, let me tell you. And I was home. For the first time, I had time to sit with myself, with my child, to evaluate what had just happened, what I wanted for the trajectory of my life. I had 3 months off from work, actually 3.5 because I had a C-section. Bonus. And when you are a Division I athlete, someone who knows at age 9 that mom and dad cannot afford college, so the only way you're going to go is by getting a full ride to go in athletics. That was the logic of the 9-year-old me. So I said, okay, I'm signing up for soccer, let's do this, day one, and did it, achieved that goal. Then worked in Division I collegiate athletics. It never stopped. The train never stopped. I was always going. Full tilt, full speed, full throttle. It was all I knew how to do. So now I'm sitting with this baby, 3.5 months to kind of figure my life out, and this deep knowing that went from here to here, this realization that I had to do it differently, that I had to change the game. And I was terrified because I had been in that job for 10 years. I was going to be the president of this organization. Everybody thought I loved my job. Everybody thought that I was the go-to mentor for this whole thing about how to be successful in this career track. But it wasn't what I wanted, and so it felt like I was carrying this big secret around. And again, if I tell my truth, what's going to happen? People are going to invalidate me. I'm going to have to face resistance again because I'm going to speak my truth, and it's going to be unpopular. It's going to cause loss. It's actually going to cause a challenge in this environment of where I work because I do a lot of things here. But I knew better this time, and because I knew better, I could do better. So on December 31st, 2013, I wrote my future self a note, and I said, I'm so proud of you for launching your business, for being home full-time with Ani, for leaving your job in a way that feels great, that feels peaceful, that feels joy-filled, because this place is so important to you. You want to make sure you do that. It was all, I wrote this letter, and it was in total integrity with really how I wanted to take the next step in my life. But I, of course, had no plans, no idea how I'm going to do this, right? I just wrote a little letter to the universe, put it in an envelope, and said, to my 2014 future self, I plan to open on December 31st, 2014. Fast forward a couple months from there, and things started to kind of happen. I joined a little program, I started working with a coach, I was getting clearer about what I was good at. I knew I loved to coach. I know I love to help people. I love to get in the trenches with them and work through their stuff. And I also knew a thing or two about branding and marketing. And I was like thinking, I can do this. I can create a business out of this. And for the first time in my life, I let it not be perfect. I let it just be what it was going to be. And I started right where I was. And so I launched my business sort of behind the scenes, covertly, while I was working still full-time, taking care of a baby at night while he was on the night shift. And I just worked at it because I knew that the only way to change my life was to change my life, was to take the action necessary to change my life, and to remember all the things that I had just learned. And now I have this beautiful motivation in the form of a 6-month-old baby, right? Dropping her off at daycare didn't feel good to me. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Didn't feel good in the loop of my life, and I knew that I needed to change that. I knew I needed to change the course of history for myself so that I could do so for others, so I could teach others to do the same. So in May of 2014, I launched my business. I gave my notice. I had one client when I did it. I didn't tell anybody that except for my husband. I told my dad recently, and he said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "Uh-huh." Yeah, I am. But I knew that if I could welcome in one client, then there would be a second. And if I had two, well then I could welcome in a third. And by the time I left, I had to give a month's notice because the job that I had there was a pretty solo job. There weren't that many reinforcements in our very lean department. I had 4 clients by the time I left. I was making more money with my business, my side business, than I was in my corporate job in my first month. That blew my mind. And it made me think, wow, you know, if I can do that, well, what else can I do? And now I have all this time right? I was working 40, 50 hours a week, and so my life just opened up, and I had all the spaciousness to do this work. And I think the most important thing to bring it all back to, friends, is I was listening to myself. I was trusting what felt right to me. It was not a popular conversation to walk in and say that I was leaving my job. It was not a popular conversation to say, I know I'm going to be the president of this organization, but I don't really want to do this anymore. People were very supportive, but it was challenging on many levels. So I launched my business, and my favorite part of this whole story is the realization that I do now what I didn't get to have, which so many of us in here, how many of us are doing work now that's so healing for you, because you get to kind of meet the person, the former version of you that didn't have something that you so needed, and now you are walking in a straight line to be of service in that way. How many of you guys in here are doing that? Yeah. So now I help women come home to who they really are. I help them come home to their families. I help them create the lives that they were created for. I help them start to say yes to themselves. But I couldn't do that until I did that first for myself. And it's been a process, and it's been a long one. But once we start to notice the patterns, we start to honor them. They become like contractions. They get closer and closer and closer together when you start to choose yourself rather than abandon yourself. And before you know it, you're birthing the next version of you. The version of you that you maybe intended to be all the way along. Maybe you didn't know it, but it makes so much sense when we look back, right? We look back over the dots of our lives. It makes so much sense. As Steve Jobs says, you can't see them looking forward. You can only see them looking back. And so I stand before you today as a mom, a business owner, a wife, a daughter, survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I am all of those versions of me right here in front of you guys today, and I'm so much more powerful. I'm so much more true, courageous, brave, and clear, bringing all versions of me here to you today. I want to leave you this really important message. It's that we cannot become who we dream ourselves to be until we understand, acknowledge, and celebrate who we've always been. I want to salute every one of you in the room right now, your inner child, your little 3, 4, 5, whatever year old. Think of that tender version of you. Close your eyes for 1 second for me, everyone, just real quick. See yourself at an age where you really needed the love that you can give yourself today. I love that 5-year-old so much. She led me to my truth, to my calling, to my sacred work in the world. I want you to do yourself a favor tonight, and I want you to honor her or him and bring them along with you on the journey and watch how the journey changes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't say enough gratitude for our speakers for honoring our story and being brave enough to stand up here tonight. Let's bring all the speakers up here.